The air in the old stone church was thick with the scent of lilies and old polish. A heavy, sweet smell that suddenly felt suffocating. I stood at the altar, my palms sweating inside my gloves, my eyes fixed on Amelia as she walked down the aisle. Her father, a man I'd come to respect, looked prouder than I'd ever seen him. Amelia herself was a vision. The white lace of her dress a stark, beautiful contrast to her dark hair. A nervous smile played on my lips, the culmination of years of waiting, of building a life together. Finally here. The organ music swelled, filling the cavernous space, each note vibrating through the wooden pews, where our friends and family sat, as a silent, smiling jury to our happiness. All I could think about was the future, our future, stretching out before us like the sunlit path outside the heavy church doors. She reached the altar, her hand, small and trembling slightly, found mine, and the universe seemed to shrink too. Just the two of us, the priest, Father Michael, a kind man with gentle eyes, cleared his throat and began the ceremony. His voice was a familiar, comforting drone, reciting words that had bound countless couples before us. I repeated my vows, my voice steadier than I expected. The words feeling more real, more potent than they ever had during the rehearsals. Poured every ounce of my love, my commitment, into that promise. When it was Amelia's turn, she looked at me. Her eyes, usually so full of life and laughter, seemed clouded, distant. I squeezed her hand gently, a silent encouragement, assuming it was just the overwhelming emotion of the day getting to her. We were so close, moments away from being pronounced husband and wife. The final seal on a love I believed to be unshakable. Then came the part I had been waiting for, the simple question that would finalize everything. Father Michael turned his serene gaze to Amelia. "Do you, Amelia Catherine Crestwood," he began, his voice echoing slightly in the sudden silence, "take this man, Jacob Daniel Foster, to be your lawfully wedded husband?" The entire church held its breath. It was a formality, a beautiful, scripted moment before the celebration. I watched her, a wide, loving smile spreading across my face. Ready for her I do. Ready to lean in and kiss my bride. Ready to begin the rest of our lives. The silence stretched, just a second too long, and a flicker of unease, cold and sharp, pierced through my joy. Her lips parted, but the words that came out were not the ones I expected. They were quiet, yet they sliced through the sacred silence of the church with the force of a physical blow. "He slept with my mum last night." The whisper carried, amplified by the perfect acoustics of the hall, reaching every ear, every shocked face. The smile on my face froze, then shattered. The world tilted on its axis. The lilies, the candlelight, the sea of faces, all blurring into an incomprehensible nightmare. I looked from Amelia's stony, tearless expression to her mother, Eleanor, sitting in the front pew, her face a perfect mask of horrified innocence. In that single, heart-stopping moment, the life I had so carefully built, the future I had so eagerly anticipated, crumbled into dust at my feet. The immediate aftermath was a symphony of chaos, a cacophony of gasps, murmured questions, and the frantic rustling of formal wear. My own family, in the pews to my left, looked on with wide-eyed disbelief, a mixture of confusion and a dawning, protective anger. Amelia's father, who had just placed his daughter's hand in mine with such paternal pride, now looked at me, as if I were a complete stranger, a monster who had suddenly revealed his true form. He moved instinctively to Amelia's side, pulling her away from me as if I were contagious, his arm a rigid barrier between us. The air, once filled with hope and organ music, was now thick with accusation and the palpable, ugly thrill of scandal. I felt hundreds of pairs of eyes on me, judging me, condemning me without a trial, and I couldn't find my voice to say a single word in my own defense. My throat was tight, my mind a blank, roaring void. My best man, David, was the first to react with any semblance of reason. He grabbed my arm, his grip firm and grounding, and started steering me towards the vestry, away from the prying, horrified stares. "Come on, man, let's go. Now." His voice was a low, urgent command in my ear, cutting through the haze of shock. The walk felt a mile long, each step an eternity under the weight of the collective gaze. I could hear Amelia start to sob, a raw, wrenching sound that tore through me, and the priest's flustered attempts to restore order were completely lost in the rising din. The heavy oak door of the vestry closing behind us felt like a final, definitive end, shutting me out of the life I was supposed to be starting. The silence inside the small room was somehow louder and more terrifying than the chaos outside. Inside, I just stood there, my tuxedo suddenly feeling like a costume for a play that had gone horribly, irrevocably wrong. David paced back and forth, running a hand through his hair, his own shock warring with his concern for me. "What the hell was that, Jake? What is she talking about?" he asked, his voice a mix of bewilderment and a desperate need for an explanation that I didn't have. I finally sank onto a small velvet chair, my head in my hands, the world spinning. "I don't know," I managed to choke out, the words feeling pathetic and inadequate. "It's not true. I was in my hotel room all night. Alone. David, you dropped me off." My mind raced, trying to piece together the hours of the previous night, searching for any detail, any moment that could be so cruelly twisted. The drive back to the empty apartment we were supposed to share was a blur of muted city sounds and streaking lights. David drove my car, wisely, while I stared out the passenger window, seeing nothing. The city I loved, the streets where Amelia and I had walked, dreamed, and built our plans, now seemed alien and hostile. Every passing car felt like it was filled with people who knew, who were pointing and whispering. The apartment, when we arrived, was sterile and silent, filled with moving boxes that were no longer symbols of a new beginning, but monuments to a catastrophic end. I walked into the living room and saw her wedding magazine still open on the coffee table, a cruel reminder of the joy that had been stolen in a single venomous sentence. For 2 days, I existed in a fog of disbelief, a ghost, haunting the apartment that was supposed to be our home. Amelia wouldn't answer my calls, her phone going straight to voicemail, each unanswered ring a fresh stab of pain. Her family had closed ranks around her, creating an impenetrable fortress of silence and accusation. I knew I couldn't get through to her, not yet. My anger, a slow-burning fire beneath the ice of my shock, needed a target. It needed answers, and I knew there was only one person who could possibly provide them. I needed to see Eleanor, Amelia's mother. The thought of facing her filled me with a cold dread, but the alternative, to sit and drown in my own confusion, was unbearable. I had to know why. I drove to her immaculate high-rise apartment, the city sprawling below in the hazy afternoon light. The doorman, who had always greeted me with a friendly nod, now looked at me with a cautious, pitying expression. The elevator ride up felt like an ascent into the heart of a storm. When she opened the door, she was perfectly composed, dressed in an elegant silk blouse, her expression one of carefully crafted sorrow. There were no signs of the previous night's supposed passion, no hint of guilt in her eyes, only the cool, polished veneer of a woman in complete control. "Jacob," she said, her voice soft and laced with a false sympathy that made my skin crawl. "I don't think this is a good idea. I need to know what you told her." "Eleanor," I said, my voice low and shaking with a rage I was struggling to contain. I stepped past her into the apartment, the air chilled by an overzealous air conditioner. The space was just like her, pristine, cold, and utterly lacking in genuine warmth. White furniture sat on white carpets, and glass tables reflected the gray sky outside, creating a sterile, almost clinical environment. "Why would you do this? You know it's a lie. You know I was at my hotel." I turned to face her, searching her face for any crack in the facade, any glimmer of the truth. She sighed, a theatrical display of weariness, and walked over to a pristine bar to pour herself a glass of water. She didn't offer me one. "Jacob, what happened between us was a mistake. A terrible, terrible mistake," she said, not looking at me, her reflection a cool silhouette against the window. I was emotional, vulnerable. The wedding. The thought of my daughter leaving. She was building a narrative, a pathetic, self-serving fiction. I confessed to Amelia in a moment of weakness, hoping for her forgiveness. I never imagined she would do that. It was a masterclass in manipulation, twisting the blame, painting herself as a tragic figure, all while driving the knife deeper into my back. I stared at her, dumbfounded by the audacity of her lies, realizing I wasn't just fighting a false accusation. I was fighting a carefully constructed reality, and I was utterly alone in my version of the truth. The days that followed were a descent into a gray, featureless existence. I moved on autopilot, the vibrant colors of my life bleached out by shock and grief. I packed my things from our apartment, each object a painful memory. A coffee mug Amelia had painted for me, a framed photo from our first trip together, the book I was reading to her before bed. They were artifacts from a buried civilization, a life that no longer existed. The silence in that apartment was the most brutal part. It was a physical presence, a constant reminder of the laughter and conversation that should have been filling it. I felt a profound sense of isolation, cut off not only from Amelia, but from the entire future I had so confidently envisioned. The city outside my window, with its relentless energy, felt like a mockery of my own stagnated, shattered world. The rain started on a Tuesday and didn't stop for 3 days. A miserable, persistent drizzle that matched the state of my soul. It streaked down the glass panes of my new, temporary apartment, a sterile, furnished place David had found for me. It felt like a halfway house for the heartbroken. It was during that relentless downpour that David became my lifeline. He'd show up unannounced with bags of groceries, or a bottle of whiskey, refusing to let me wallow in complete solitude. He wouldn't offer platitudes or easy answers. Instead, he would just sit with me, sometimes in silence, just being a presence in the room, a solid anchor in the swirling chaos of my thoughts. His steadfast support was a small, flickering light in an overwhelming darkness. "You can't let her mother win," David said one evening, his voice firm as he pushed a plate of takeout in front of me. I hadn't eaten a real meal in days. "This is exactly what she wants. For you to fall apart, for everyone to see you as this broken man, which only makes her lie look more plausible." He was right, of course. The obstacle wasn't just the accusation itself, but the insidious, calculated campaign by Eleanor to destroy my credibility and my spirit. It was a war of perception, and I was losing badly. Overcoming this meant more than just clearing my name. It meant refusing to be the victim she was trying to make me. It meant finding the strength to fight back, not with anger, but with resolve. Conversation was a turning point. It was the first time I felt a flicker of my old self return, a spark of defiance against the crushing weight of the situation. The support from David made me realize I wasn't entirely alone. My family, though distant and unsure how to help, called daily, their voices a thread connecting me to a reality where I was still loved, still believed. This support didn't erase the pain or the complexity of the problem, but it provided a foundation from which I could start to rebuild. I began to see that my personal growth through this ordeal depended on my ability to lean on others, to accept help, and to understand that surrendering to despair was the only way I could truly lose. A week after the wedding that never was, Amelia agreed to see me. She chose a neutral location, a small, quiet park halfway between her parents' house and my new, sterile apartment. The sky was a pale, washed-out blue, and a cool breeze rustled the leaves of the trees, a stark contrast to the emotional furnace churning inside me. I saw her sitting on a bench near the duck pond, looking small and fragile. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed and hollow. The vibrant, joyful woman I was supposed to marry had been replaced by this heartbroken stranger. As I approached, my heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, desperate rhythm. This conversation felt like a final plea, a last-ditch effort to salvage something from the wreckage. I sat down on the other end of the bench, a deliberate, cavernous space between us. For a long time, we just sat in silence, watching the ducks glide across the water, the ordinary calmness of the scene feeling surreal and out of place. "I loved you," she finally said, her voice barely a whisper, the past tense of the verb hitting me with the force of a physical blow. "I loved you so much, Jake. I thought you were my forever." Tears began to slide down her cheeks, and she didn't bother to wipe them away. Seeing her pain, so raw and real, was agonizing, because I knew it was built on a foundation of absolute deceit. "Amelia, look at me," I pleaded, my voice cracking. "I love you. Nothing has changed for me. I did not do this. Your mother is lying." I laid out the truth, calmly and logically, detailing my movements, reminding her of the man she knew me to be, the character I had shown her over 5 years. "She has never liked me. You know that." She saw this as her last chance to stop us. My words hung in the air between us, desperate and sincere, but I could see the wall of doubt in her eyes. Her mother's poison had seeped in too deep, clouding her judgment and eclipsing the years of trust we had so carefully built together. "But why, Jake? Why would she lie about something so monstrous?" she asked, her voice filled with a genuine, agonizing confusion that was almost worse than anger. "She's my mother," she cried. "She confessed to me. She seemed so broken." It was then that I truly understood the depth of Eleanor's manipulation. She hadn't just lied. She had performed, creating a convincing illusion of a guilt-ridden woman, a victim of her own weakness. In that moment, looking at the inconsolable woman I loved, I realized the truth might not be enough. The trust between us wasn't just cracked. It had been systematically demolished by the one person she was supposed to be able to trust implicitly. And I was caught in the devastating fallout. Leaving the park that day felt like a final goodbye. Amelia's inability to see through her mother's deception was a chasm I couldn't cross. I moved the last of my belongings out of our old apartment and tried to settle into my new, anonymous life. The city, once our shared playground, now felt like a landscape of ghosts. Every street corner held a memory, every familiar cafe a phantom of a future that would never be. The primary obstacle was no longer just proving my innocence to the world, but grappling with the internal wreckage. It was a battle for my own sanity, a struggle to reconcile the love I still felt for Amelia with the profound betrayal of her distrust. David remained my anchor. He forced me out of the apartment, dragging me to basketball games and noisy bars, not to forget, but to remember that there was still a world outside my personal hell. "You can't let this define you," he told me one night, over the roar of a crowd at a local game. "This is a chapter, Jake, a horrible, messed up chapter. But it's not the whole book." His friendship was a practical, grounding force. He helped me navigate the logistics of my new life, from finding furniture to dealing with the pitying looks from mutual acquaintances. This external support was crucial. It built a scaffold around my crumbling identity, allowing me to start the slow, arduous process of rebuilding from the inside out. My growth began, not with a dramatic epiphany, but with small, quiet moments of acceptance. It was accepting that I couldn't force Amelia to believe me. It was accepting that her mother's motivations were a toxic mix of jealousy and control that I would never fully comprehend. I started channeling my anger and frustration into something productive. I threw myself back into my work as an architect, pouring my emotional turmoil into designs, creating structures with the order and logic that my life now lacked. I began jogging along the river at dawn, the physical exertion a release for the mental anguish. Watching the sun rise over the skyline, a daily reminder that darkness does eventually give way to light. The biggest step in my personal growth was learning to forgive. Not Eleanor, for her actions were unforgivable, and not even Amelia, for the pain was still too raw. Instead, I had to forgive myself. I had to let go of the guilt of not seeing the red flags in Eleanor's behavior, the subtle manipulations I had brushed aside over the years. I had to accept that I had been deceived, not because I was foolish, but because I had chosen to trust, to love, and to believe in the good in people. It was a painful, liberating realization. I was not a victim of my own naivete, but a casualty of a calculated, cruel betrayal. And with that acceptance came a sense of peace, a quiet resolve to move forward, not as a broken man, but as someone who had survived the fire. 3 months after the shattered wedding day, the autumn air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of change. The relentless heat of the city summer had finally broken, and with it, the fever of my own grief. I had made a decision. It wasn't born from anger or a desire for revenge, but from the quiet, solid place of self-respect I had fought so hard to reclaim. I arranged to meet Amelia one last time, at the same park bench. This time, there was no desperation in my heart, only a somber clarity. She looked healthier, the hollowed-out look in her eyes replaced by a deep, lingering sadness. We were two people forever marked by a tragedy, but I was no longer drowning in it. "I'm moving, Amelia," I said, my voice steady. "I've taken a job with a firm in Chicago. I leave at the end of the month." It wasn't an ultimatum or a plea for her to stop me. It was a statement of fact, the closing of a door. I told her that I would always love the woman I was supposed to marry, the woman who existed before her mother's poison took root. But I couldn't build a life with someone who didn't trust me, whose faith in me was so fragile it could be shattered by a single, monstrous lie. The foundation was gone, and no amount of love could rebuild a house on rubble. Her tears this time were different. They weren't the hysterical sobs of a victim, but the quiet, regretful tears of someone beginning to understand the magnitude of what she had lost. She admitted it, Amelia whispered, her voice breaking. "A few weeks ago, there was a fight, and she finally told me the truth. She said she did it to protect me from a man she thought wasn't good enough." The confession I had once craved now felt like a hollow victory. It changed nothing. The damage was done, the trust irrevocably broken. Her mother had won in the most tragic way possible, saving her daughter from a happy marriage by destroying it from within. I stood up. The park bench no longer a place of judgment, but simply a piece of my history. I wished her peace, and I meant it. As I walked away, I didn't look back. I was leaving behind the ghost of our shared future, the painful echoes of what could have been. The city skyline loomed ahead, no longer a hostile landscape but a familiar place I was choosing to leave on my own terms. The pain was still there, a scar on my soul, But it no longer defined me. I was walking towards a new city, a new life, not running from the past, but carrying its lessons with me, stronger, wiser, and finally, irrevocably.